Hey, I need your help on something.
What's up?
I forgot to shoot an intro yesterday for gear tasting, so I'm going to need your help shooting one real quick.
All right.
But it's okay, I got an idea. We'll make it work.
Okay. I don't know if this is going to work, man.
No, it'll work, man. Just go with it. Just say the line just like I said.
Okay. Welcome to Gear Tasting. I'm Bryan Black.
Hey guys, welcome to Gear Tasting. I am freshly off the Mammoth Sniper Challenge and have decided to go through all of my gear. I kind of did this initially in my hotel room after the fact, but what I wanted to share with you guys are my notes and feedback from the event, particularly relating to gear. So we'll have a write-up on ITS of an actual AR, and we'll make sure share that in the description eventually once it gets published, if it's not already by the time you watch this. But this will be particularly focused on just the gear aspect of the event. I'm not really going to be going into too many details on what the event was about and what I was doing there. Definitely check that out in the article. So first off, let's get into the gear. So what I wanted to first go over is the clothing that I was wearing. I'll kind of take this kind of as a first, second, third line type thing and see if that works on how to get through all this, because it was a lot of stuff I took. I have a lot of feedback and a lot of notes on everything I used and even didn't use. So that's what I kind of wanted to talk about. So first off, when it came to the clothing, I was very impressed with the way the Arc'teryx stuff that I took handled itself, with the exception of one piece of gear. So the Talos top that I took, that I initially started off wearing, because of the humidity and I guess the potential for rain that was there, so there's very humid environment, it was about to rain, very overcast and cloudy, nothing dried, and I literally mean nothing. I had this on top of my pack, I laid stuff out at night, socks and other things, and nothing dried. So this was an eye-opening experience just in terms of the environment, because it went from cloudy and overcast and 50 degrees all the way to weather on Sunday with snow and a wind chill of like 11. So it's a very broad spectrum of weather, and I really had to adjust my clothing quite a bit. So it was very interesting to go through, and I'd like to share that too, when it comes to the clothing. But so because this is a cotton nylon blend, it did not dry, and I should have known better when it comes to environments like that. Cotton's rotten, and I preach that all the time, and this is one area where I got to see it firsthand. So this top, once it got soaked from sweat and all the hikes we were doing, we covered approximately 15 miles a day when it came to the Fitbit that I was wearing. So I tracked everything I was doing, and it came out to roughly 32,000 steps or something like that each day, each of the 2 main days, full days. So we were hiking somewhere in the neighborhood of, it was hiking less than 15 miles, but at any rate, it was a lot of walking, a lot of moving. So we would transition between the stages for shooting and have 19 minutes a mile to hike to the next one. And the distances ranged from 2 to 4 miles between the stages. So we would have to move at a pretty good pace to make sure we made the time hack once we got to the next shooting stage. So at any rate, I started off in this, sweated it out on the first hike, and it never dried. So that was a waste of time to take. So what I did wind up doing is thankfully taking the level 1 PCU top, and the protective combat uniform top is available online. I think you can get them from various places, even eBay. But this level 1 PCU was a godsend. It really was. I never took this off after that thing got soaked. I put this on, and it was good to go every time. So what I would do on the hikes is I would layer. So when we were standing still after we got done with a hike, I would pretty much be in this the whole time. So this is what I would hike in. I had this on, and then I had this OR windstopper beanie on, and that's what I would make the hikes with. So obviously when you're exerting a lot of energy, you're sweating. So I would sweat out this shirt pretty much on every hike, and I found that when I stopped, I would quickly put on this Atom jacket like this, and it would dry the internal shirt through I guess the evaporation. It would go through this layer, and I'd wind up drying it as I wore it on my body, so I didn't have to worry about anything. So that was key for me, was making sure that as soon as I stopped, I threw this Atom jacket on, and it just continued drying, and it was a champ. So that was great. And then if the weather was even colder, depending on what day it was, I would also layer with this Alpha LT top too. So these 3 layers were my main go-to layers, and this is all I took. Like I said, this Talos top was just nothing more than weight after the first day, and I hated that I even had it. I honestly wanted to just throw it down and bury it somewhere so I didn't have to take it with me, because ounces equal pounds and pounds equal pain. So the more you're carrying, the more you have to deal with that. So I mentioned the OR beanie. This performed phenomenally. This is one of the best things that I own, and if you have a chance to get these, I don't even know if they make them anymore, I would definitely suggest it. But what I would do is, as I would start the hike, I would have this on because it was colder. But as I would feel myself start to sweat, I would pull it off and stick it in my cargo pocket so that it didn't completely sweat out. Because as soon as I stopped and I threw on the Atom layer, I would also throw this back on to help me stay warm. So pants-wise, I had these Sphinx pants on, and I really like these. I've never completely been a big fan of the big Cordura, or actually it's webbing, the big webbing strip that goes down the knee on the Sphinx pants, but I actually really liked it, considering how much I was kind of in the dirt. So you can see just how kind of caked with mud everything got. You look at my boots, and there was mud everywhere, and a lot is pretty much kind of fallen off these boots, but I literally had mud covering the complete toe of my boot on multiple occasions. So the roads we were walking on were just completely muddy. I mean, I was, in mud up to here in some places, and I tried my best, and thankfully I had those hiking sticks with me. So I was able to use these expand. They're not midget sticks, by the way. But I was able to use these to brace myself too, so that's another benefit of hiking poles, is that you can use those to have basically 4 points of contact when you're moving through areas. So a lot of the places a lot of guys were just stepping in mud up to their ankles, I was able to go around, and because of the hiking poles, kind of stay on the trail still and balance myself because I had these. So I really felt lucky that I had those hiking poles. So helped keep my boots a little drier too. But so I wore, this was a great thing that I brought too, was their Riggers belt. And one reason I really like it is because it's so flat. So with traditional belts, depending on what you're wearing, you have a thick layer back here for your belt. And if you're rolling a hip belt like this, a belt like that can dig in, especially when it comes to riding on a belt like that. So I really appreciated that I had this belt, and it worked out really well. And I'd hiked with it before I left, and I'm glad that I kind of figured out that I wanted a nice flat belt to take. So that was great to take. So as I mentioned, everything was completely muddy, and I really wish I had a pair of gaiters. That's what I should have brought. I should have brought some gaiters to kind of help keep the mud off my pants, because I would have liked to have slept in my pants on the last night since it was colder. But since they were so muddy, and like I said, nothing ever dried, I really didn't want to do that. So I did have the pants from the level 1 PCU 2, and I was really glad I had these. So on Sunday, when it dropped down to it was 20 degrees with 11 degrees is what it felt like with the wind chill. I had these on, and they did keep me warm. So I had all my layers on Sunday when it dropped down, and then I even put these on too, because it started to snow, and I was worried about sitting down in the snow and getting wet, and it's soaking through these pants. These are like a soft shell material, and they're great, but at the same time, I'm glad that I had these. They're a little more weight than the white Wraith pants that I talked about bringing, and I left these and I brought these, so I'm glad that I did that. But these were good to protect me from basically sitting down, and that's one of the things that I really didn't think about before I left, but I was sitting down in mud and grime a lot, so I'm kind of glad that I had that kind of stuff. The assault gloves, the assault FR gloves from Arc'teryx, held up really well. I do wish that I would have brought this. I left this before I left the hotel room. I just left it behind. But since these are kind of a lighter weight glove, I really felt like having this would have save my hands from getting pretty cold, and they did. I had to kind of keep them in my pockets the whole time to just keep my hands warm. But I would have liked to have had this. This is from FHF Gear, and it just kind of slips over your belt like this, and you can just have your hands in this muff like that. So I'm glad I brought this. I just wish I would have taken it. So there you go. So the other thing clothing-wise, again, like I said, nothing was drying. So I had 3 pairs of socks, including the one I had on to start with. So I had 2 additional pairs. And one was supposed to be for sleeping, which I used them for the first night. But after that first night and nothing dried, I had to start cycling those into my sock rotation. And, you know, I had a pair of socks hanging off my bag. I brought this Type 1 paracord in the repair kit and kind of made myself a little sock drying apparatus here. So I took 2 taut line hitches like this and just basically had a pair of socks, you know, on each one of these, and it was hanging off my bag and nothing, it didn't dry. So like I said, I wish I would have either brought more socks or anticipated the moisture in the air and kind of planned accordingly. So I do wish I had brought more socks. So that's kind of what that equated to. So the last morning too, on Sunday, I had this Patagonia down vest, and I'm super glad I brought this because even with everything that I just talked about that I had on, including the level 1 bottoms underneath 2 pairs of pants, I still needed this, and I'm glad I had it. I kind of questioned it at first, and I almost left it behind, and I'm glad I took it. It's a down layer, which doesn't really fit into the whole evaporation part of the gear, how, you know, your body heat and sweat's supposed to transfer out. And I wouldn't have worn this when I was on a hike or anything that I was actually exerting myself, but when I was standing still waiting to shoot, I'm super glad that I had this. So that was great. They're a little costly, but well worth it in my opinion. So that's pretty much wraps up clothing. I will talk real quick about boots before we jump to the other stuff. I was worried, like I had mentioned before, that, you know, the leather lining was not going to hold up, but I stepped in mud, like I said, covering the toes, and I never had an issue with anything coming through the leather lining of these Loa Renegades. So that's a win in my book. I had taken those, Maddox dry socks that I talked about, and I didn't even have to use them. So that was additional weight I didn't want to have. But, you know, again, I think that if a downpour would have happened, I would have put these on. So this is kind of essential gear that I didn't use, but I'm glad I had it. So what else? I also did really good preventative maintenance on my feet with Leuco tape. I had cut strips before I left, kind of like this. So I'd taken wax paper. You can use parchment paper too, and you can pre-cut Leuco tape on strips like this and actually apply it to, like I applied it to the back of my feet like this. So that's where I typically get blisters after long miles, is on the back of my heels, and I also get them on the footbed up here. So I had pre-cut strips to kind of go in the back, and across shorter ones to go in the front right here. So I put those on as soon as I started feeling hot spots. I made sure I didn't have time to actually stop on the legs, so I was trying to make time, but as soon as I stopped, I made sure to get that on, and I feel like that preventative maintenance really saved my feet. And also what's good is having alcohol pads like this too, because you can clean your feet first before you apply the Leuco tape, and it helps it stick better. So let's move on to another area of gear. Okay guys, so next I wanted to move on to the gun. The gun performed flawlessly. I think the only errors on some of the stages that I didn't do so well on was more operator error. So that was me not focusing on my fundamentals and things like that. But just real quick, I mean, everything in the build itself performed flawlessly. One thing I want to say too is that I didn't really care for the way that I was carrying the gun on the pack. It worked well. So what I had, and if you've seen the last gear tasting video, I had the gun pretty much underneath the top lid of the ruck like this under my Alice pack. I don't really care for the fact that the gun sweeps everybody as you're walking by. It's just not something I particularly care for, but I did it because I didn't really have another way to carry the rifle on the Alice pack, because they particularly said in this competition you're not supposed to use a sling on the stages. So I would have had to take the sling off the mounts at every stage I went to, and I just didn't really want to deal with that. Plus, slinging a rifle with an Alice pack would just have been a brutal way to move between the stages on all the mileage we covered. So I wish there was another way. There's other packs in the market like the Eberly Stock Gunslinger packs, and a lot of guys were running those out there. I just don't particularly care for the weight that those packs run at, and my shooting partner was running a LaRue OBR, and he had a gunslinger pack, and he just had all kinds of problems with the gun shifting around a lot, and kind of moving from side to side and kind of taking him to one direction. So anyway, just an aside kind of on the rifle stuff too. But again, the only issue I had on one of the stages was not following my pre and post shot checklist, which is to zero the gun, or to rotate the turrets on the elevation back to zero on my dope. And one stage really got me on that, so I didn't rotate it back. And what had happened is, I've gone over this before, but the way that this particular turret works on this loopholed scope is that once you get to 14 MOA or 15 MOA, it starts going another rotation. So it had already rotated around, and I thought it was a different thing. And I was off by 5 mils on a target and just totally blowing it. And that was what it was. The part of the post-shot checklist is to, rotate your turret back to zero, and I didn't do it. So that really screwed me up on a round. So at any rate, that's just kind of the gun stuff. The magazines were heavy. One thing that they make, or a company out there makes, I can't remember who, these are AI mags, so Accurate Industries, I think. Anyway, there's a company out there that makes mags that are more sized like this, but they hold 10 rounds versus a 10-round mag like this. So that's something I'm going to look into. Ammo-wise, the ammo performed perfectly. Never had a problem with the failure to feed or any kind of ammo issues. But the big issue is that I brought 200 rounds of ammo and only shot 70. So one thing I want to say about the Mammoth Sniper Challenge is that you can shoot a total of 200 rounds. The fact is, you're probably, even I think the top shooters there probably didn't even have a chance to shoot 200 rounds. So I don't know what I was thinking coming into that as kind of my first tournament like that. I should have definitely taken more like 150 rounds or even 125 rounds, or hell, I probably could have even got away with 100, but I just didn't want to deal with that. So just to give you an idea, 200 rounds is approximately 11 pounds. So, I was carrying quite a bit of weight just in ammo that I didn't have to be carrying. So that was a lesson learned on my part. But the bag situation that I ran the ammo in worked great, so I was glad to have that. The pockets on the Alice pack, I basically had the ammo in the far pockets as well as a magazine in each, and it was very quick to come off a stage and reload the mags and have them ready in these pockets to just grab for the next stage. So that was good. So food wise, this is just an extra meal that I took just in case, and I didn't wind up eating, but Paleo Meals to Go had sent me a bunch of meals, and basically my caloric intake calculated out was about roughly 2,800 calories a day, and I probably could have eaten in the neighborhood of 3,500 calories. So I could have brought more food, but I was hungry at times, but overall I felt like that was a pretty good ratio for, from weight to food like that. And then I had snacks from the feed, which I have their shirt on. So those were things that ranged from those waffles to, what else did I take? The honey stinger gels, different types of bars that I had for snacks each day. And I'll tell you, one of the best things that I still say to this day is that Lipton cup of soup is probably one of the most morale boosting things to make, especially on cold days. I was able to just toss it in the jet boil and heat it up and drink it right out of the jet boil, and it's amazing. So if you're camping or hiking and things like that, I definitely recommend that. What else? So Jolly Ranchers were great to have. Those little kind of morale booster too that I had. But the jet boil that I took had a catastrophic failure on the bottom, on the heat sink, I guess is what this is called. But this is loose and coming apart. I'm not really sure what caused it, but it started to melt at one point. And I'll show you here. So on the unit that this sits on top of, it actually melted onto the handle. If you can see that, there's a little chunk of molten metal that dripped onto there, and I'm glad my hand wasn't under there when that happened. But I'm gonna have to send this back to Jetboil and get them to fix it. But the igniter was already out on it. It wasn't working, so I had to have a lighter in my pocket the whole time to light the stove. And I just realized that I had left this behind because you can't travel with fuel, and the TSA checked my bag on the way home, and I think it's because I accidentally had this left over in my Jetboil. So sorry about that, TSA. They didn't pull it out though. I'm not really sure why they didn't take that, but at any rate, that's my Jetboil story. And then I had my little piece of greeny weeny scrubby there, and that's worth its weight in gold. It really helps to clean out the food, especially if you're using the Jetboil like I was to kind of make meals in as well as boil water. What else? So food-wise, that's pretty much that. Again, big thanks to Paleo Meals to Go and the feed for helping me out with the food on that. I had a contractor bag with me, and my goal with this was to put down as a floor, essentially, to my tent, and I never used it for that. And then the other reason I had it was to lay down in the mud and stuff to sit on, and I never did that either. So I had it and I didn't use it, but I wish I would have remembered that I had it so I could have done that. So, and actually this is a trash compactor bag, not a contractor bag, so I like these a little better. Redundancy wise, I took a fire knife. I shouldn't have. What I should have done is just use what was in the survival kit to light a fire if I had to. I was kind of thinking that I'd be building a fire every night and using a fire knife. If you're not familiar with these, they've got a little striker in the butt of the knife, so it makes it really easy to start a fire with. And I don't know, I should have not even worried about that because I had my pocket knife, and this would have been just fine. I could have saved a little weight there. Booba kit was invaluable to have. I cut the crap out of my finger on the first night, so I went to fold up the bipod on my gun, and my hands were cold, and it was in the wrong place, and actually pinched the crap out of my hand until the skin just broke and flapped open. And it was a bad day. I mean, it looked like a gypsy camp because I had all my Booba kit stuff spread all over the place when the guys got in. And anyway, that's why we have quality Band-Aids in the Booba kit too. It's kind of a testament to that, and it's the reason I wanted to include those when we built this kit, is because I was able to run these Band-Aids the whole time with everything we were doing, the hiking, everything, and they never fell off my finger. So, and even washing my hands, they never fell off. So good Band-Aids are important in a first aid kit, so make sure you have those. Or you can pick up our Booba kit. We have those too. I never had to use the trauma kit, thankfully, but it's one of those kind of necessary things that I had that I never used. Also an emergency blanket. I brought a little MPIL too, and next time, since the emergency blanket I had vacuum sealed is orange, I'll probably just take this so I can use that as a signaling device instead of taking the extra weight. You know, again, it's ounces, but you know, like I said, ounces matter. I had the little nunchuck signaling device that I made too. I probably will leave this home next time. I did have two pens, two Right in the Rain pens, and I'm glad I did because my shooting partner had a pencil, mechanical pencil that broke, and he had to use one of mine, so glad that I had that. The shooting rear bag that I had was great. Yeah, you know, it's got the QD on it, so I could connect it to the front of my gun here, so it was always with the gun, which I liked. And it's also nice because the QDs on this gun are right up front. I can do this, there you go. So on a stage, I had to remove the bipod and use this as a rest, and I'm glad that I had it. So, and it's extremely lightweight. It's made by Short Action Precision, so highly recommend that piece of kit for sure. I did leave my Sordens behind, and you know, someone joked with me about that, about not leaving my Sordens, and this time I left them on purpose. So that's pretty heavy in terms of gear, and what I did is actually took these smaller Surefire Defender, I think they're called Defenders, but this is the ear pro I had that I just had in my pocket the whole time. So what I really need to do is come up with an option for electronic ear pro that's this size, and I know they make in-ear electronic ear pro, so I'd really like to get some of that for the next competition I do like that, because I really had a problem not hearing my shooting partner and the RO that was making calls as we were shooting, because these work so well. So, you know, there's a trade-off. You know, you don't want to carry the weight of ear pro like this and carry this. So I'm going to look more into to that as an option too. I think I just turned these on. Sorry. So anyway, moving on. Princeton Tech headlamp was phenomenal. What I did when I was hiking at night, because there were definitely some night hikes after we got done shooting, what I would do is when I was on the paved roads, I would use the brightest red LED on the paved roads, and then when we were off-road in all the mud and muck, I went to white light as I was hiking. So, and I never had to change the battery. I brought two 123 batteries with me for replacement, and I used this quite a bit and never had to change the battery, so that was kind of extra weight too. Shooting glasses, little Oakley M frames, they were clear, worked out great, as did the lanyard that I had. Kestrel was awesome. This was one of the best pieces of gear that I had. Not only could I read wind speed with this, but because we trued the data from my dope into the Kestrel, which I will get into in an article because that's an art form, and one of the guys in our group, Bryan, helped out with that quite a bit. And I want to explain how we did that too, because what I was able to do is get a quick reference from my dope based on what the Kestrel was telling me in terms of what was happening atmospherically with things like the barometer and things that were dropping while we were there. So this was invaluable to have, and I look forward to actually doing a write-up on the Kestrel itself. And this is the Kestrel with the applied ballistics. This is their new Link Kestrel. So really glad I had that. This was my little spare parts thing. Super glad I had that too. Originally I had this tarp that I was going to take and all this paracord to tie it down with. I left this behind. I really probably would have hoped that I would have had it if it rained, but I decided since the weather wasn't a big deal, I wasn't going to mess with it, and I left it behind. So I'm glad I did, save some weight. And again, I used the Type 1 paracord, and this is really all I used. I used this to hang my socks with, and I used this as a drying line to run between two trees and hang up some gear at night, which didn't dry anyway. So, there is that. This small roll of Gorilla Tape was awesome because I had a blowout on my shoulder strap. Right here it actually came off, and I had to basically reroute it and just tape it again to make sure it didn't come off. Alice Pack itself performed great. I'm really glad that I had the mod on for the Fastex buckles on the lid. It really made it easy to adjust because I wound up carrying the spotting scope we had as well as the tripod at one point, so it was nice to be able to adjust everything. And this pack, as you can see, got pretty beat up, and I really enjoyed having the Alice Pack. I mean, just a little aside on the pack, it was comfortable to wear. I'm not hurt. I logged quite a few miles in this weekend and performed great. So I'm glad I took it. There's a reason I wanted to take the Alice Pack, and just because I'm comfortable with it and I know that it holds up well, and it did not disappoint. So a couple other things real quick. Tent worked great. Sleeping bag. The first night we kind of slept under the stars, so to speak. We had these wooden pallet type frames with an overhang on them, and we were able to crash under that. So I was able to just use the ground pad that I had, which was lightweight and performed well too, and to just kind of lay out. I was worried about moisture though, but when I woke up in the morning, the sleeping bag wasn't wet. Just because it's down, I kind of worry about that with a sleeping bag. So maybe next year I'll just take a bivvy instead of a tent, but I knew that if it started to rain, I wanted a vestibule to put all my gear under, so there's a trade-off there too. I did not wind up taking my heavy pillow. I wound up taking just the Tyvek stuff sack with I think I mentioned this before, it's got some Ziplocs in there that I just kind of inflate, or you can put clothing inside, which I couldn't do because I was wearing all my clothes pretty much. So I had kind of a 2 dry bag system for all my gear, and it worked out great. So had a lot of the accessory stuff in one dry bag and sleeping bag and tent in the other, and it worked out really well. Nothing got wet, but we didn't have a big downpour either. So this was a little redundant. This is my DOP kit that had quite a bit of stuff in it, a lot of weight. I definitely would have cut that down, and one of these days when I talk about the DOP kit, I'll get into that too. A pack towel was good to have. This is a little McNett towel. It was just big. I don't think I needed as much towel as I took. So, a smaller cut down version of this probably would have just been just fine. And then when we were kind of calculating dope on each of the stages, I had this rifles only data card holder. You can kind of slap bracelet that onto your arm. It worked out really well for the most part, but what I found is that when it was cold outside, I couldn't open the data card holder up here with gloves on, so maybe some tabs would have helped better. And then on a stage, I almost lost it because it fell off my arm because because you can see it doesn't wrap all the way around. There's no way of securing it, so almost lost it on a stage, which would have been bad because a lot of my notes on dope were in there. But thankfully, I had the Kestrel. So one more thing, I guess, batteries. I try to just take a minimum amount of spares. I didn't take all this that I have here. And just a tip that lithium batteries are better in the cold and they weigh less. So when you're talking about ounces, definitely go with lithiums. So hopefully you enjoyed my little walkthrough of all the gear I took. I wrote myself a ton of notes, so I'm better prepared the next time I do something like this. So I would highly encourage that you guys do that too as you come back from an event or come back from camping and backpacking. Sort your stuff. So take a look at what you used, take a look at what you didn't use, and then take a look at what you took and didn't use but were necessities, like things like a trauma kit or first aid kit and things like that. So thanks a lot. One last thing I forgot to mention was the hydration bladder that I took. They had water fill stations at every place that I stopped, so I wish I would have taken 2 Nalgene's versus a hydration bladder because it froze on me. So the water in the hydration bladder froze because of the temperatures we were under on Sunday, and it was my fault for not breathing the water back into the hydration bladder. So you can do that to keep the tube from freezing. You can actually blow the water back into the bladder and it'll help. But at the same time, the water was actually starting to freeze in the bladder too. So I don't know how much that would have actually helped. A tip too, in case you don't know, is every time I fill one of these, I invert it and I'll suck out the air that's left in the bladder and then close it back up, and it prevents that sloshing sound that you may hear too. So just a little aside. And I have lost this before on a hydration bladder, and I found it thankfully when I was out. But I typically carry a spare of these with me as well on the source bladder, so that's just a tip as well. All right, so let's go over some questions over coffee. So Matt V asks on Facebook, so for cold weather gear, shemagh or balaclava? So I kind of addressed this a little bit, and one thing I didn't mention in my loadout for Mammoth was that I wish I would have had a neck gaiter. So when it was getting down pretty cold on Sunday, I had my OR beanie, that windstopper beanie on, as well as the hood pulled down over my Alpha LT jacket, and I was still cold. I mean, I had everything zipped up as high as it could go on my neck, but I wish I would have had a neck gaiter or something like that. So yes, you could run a balaclava, but it really just depends on the weather conditions. So a thinner balaclava might not be the best thing to wear if you can do something with a thicker neck gaiter that kind of pulls up over your nose as well. So that's kind of what I mean by neck gaiter. I wanted something that not only covered my neck, but I could pull up kind of over my nose if I needed to, and then wear in addition to the beanie that I have. So shemagh, I mean, shemagh is not really a cold weather thing, so I wouldn't recommend that. It's not going to stop any wind, especially if you have a holey one like this or some of the thinner cotton ones. You're definitely not going to stop any wind like that. So thanks for the question, Matt. All right, so next one is a 2-part question from Bryan, who spells his name wrong with an I. Says he's building an AR and wanted to get your opinion on barrel conditioning. Is this something you'd recommend, or is it really even worth it on the 5.56? I have never conditioned a barrel, or I never will in my life, so I'm not really sure what to tell you on that. I'm not quite sure that. I mean, I imagine barrel conditioning is actually lubing up the barrel, shooting around, and then figuring out what to do after that. And that's not something I personally have ever done, so it's not something I can really even speak to with authority because I've never done it. So I don't feel it's necessary on an AR, but that's purely my opinion. So I would probably do some more research on that and talk to your parents about the way they spell Bryan. It's ridiculous. All right, so I've put together, second part question, I've put together a rifle based on the exact specs on your DIY AR-15 build and wanted to get your opinion on pinning and welding versus epoxy. My local gun shop says that they've switched to doing only epoxy and it's just as permanent as pinning and welding. Is this something you recommend? Absolutely 110% no. Stop going to that gun shop. They shouldn't be telling you to epoxy anything. That's actually against the ATF rules from the National Firearms Act that we printed out, and I'm going to read to you to make sure that nobody ever does that stupid epoxy crap. All right, so permanent methods of attachment, and this is from the National Firearms Act Handbook from atf.gov on page 6. So permanent methods of attachment include full fusion gas or electric steel seam welding, comma, high temperature 110 degree Fahrenheit silver soldering, comma, or blind pinning with the pin head welded over, which is what I did on that DIY AR-15 series that we did. So if you're not using one of those 3 methods, just don't do it at all, because you're already breaking the law and you don't want to get caught doing that. So this epoxy stuff that your gun shop is telling you to do, you just probably need to stay away from them, because they're probably doing some other stuff that's probably not right, and probably might want to find another gun shop. So hope that answers your question. All right, so another question is from Eric. Saw your online DIY AR-15 build and decided that I'm going to give it a go. I noticed it was back in 2011 when it was filmed, so I have to ask, is everything, information, etc. still current as far as AR-15 standards? Has anything changed? When I build this, are my barrel options limited to a particular length and caliber? Or is the sky the limit? So a couple questions in there. First off, nothing has really changed since I did the build. Things are still built the same way when it comes to ARs. Thanks to the best gun salesman in the world, though, Obama, again. Things are a little dicey and hard to find right now. Bravo Company just released a really good lower parts kit, and Stag had some recent trouble with the ATF, and it may not be as easy to get their lower parts kits anymore. I'm not quite sure. But that's our lower parts kit we used in the build, and one that I recommend to people when we talk about building ARs. So you might want to look into either of those 2 companies. Like I said, Bravo Company has always put out really good quality manufactured parts, and if they're manufacturing a lower parts kit, I would have no problem recommending that, even though I haven't personally used one yet. But I plan on buying one in the future when I can, Obama. Thanks a lot, Obama. Anyway, so next part, are barrel options limited to a particular length and caliber? Is the sky the limit? No, you're not really limited to any barrel length, but once you breach the 16-inch mark, so you start decreasing in size from 16 to 14 and a half, you have to do what I was mentioning to the Bryan that spells his name wrong, which is permanently weld your flash hider to make sure that it reaches a maximum length of 16. So you can't decrease from the 16-inch mark without registering, no, sorry, that's the wrong word, without getting a tax stamp and paying $200 to the ATF to have a short barrel rifle. So once you go shorter than that, you're going to have to start buying tax stamps and become a stamp collector. I've got a few of them myself, and it's not fun. So hopefully that gets overturned one of these days. All right. So thanks for the questions. Remember that if you have questions for gear tasting, just use the pound tag gear tasting. And one thing that I wanted to remind everybody about before we end gear tasting this time is that if you're going to SHOT Show, which by the time you're watching this on Thursday will be in just a couple of days, and it's coming up next week, we have our annual meet and greet on Tuesday night at the Bond Bar inside Hotel Cosmo at 8 p.m. So be sure to come check that out. You're free to come, but we'd prefer that you RSVP on our Facebook page. We've got an event set up there, so just search ITS Tactical on Facebook and check out the event. Yeah, come out. It's a great time. We're actually going to be showcasing some gear that we're coming out with very soon after SHOT Show that you won't want to miss, as well as giving away some SHOT Show swag. So thanks for watching Gear Tasting.